Okay, this will probably be our last one. I'm gonna have you two answer this one real quick. When does it make sense to include siblings or the rest of the family in Cornerstone?
For us, it made sense to do that immediately because our youngest, let's see, Patrick was 16 at the time. Our youngest was 6. And then we had 2 in between. So 2 other teenagers that were younger than Patrick. And they're all girls, and we also homeschooled. So talk about, sheltering, and they had no idea that any of this was going on with Patrick. They were pretty shocked. Involving them from the beginning, it also happened naturally because everything we were learning in recovery, we started implementing at home. And it began with just conversations with the younger ones to let them know that Patrick had a disease, and that we still love Patrick, and we could be angry with addiction. It began with when he finally came home and we sent him to sundown, and the younger ones had to write letters. So we just gave them some, small instruction, like the letters directed to addiction. So we made sure to try to share with them as much as we could, because they could see the pain and they were all suffering. They could see mom and dad, something big was going on, and Patrick is gone. Someone is gone. It's like he's disappeared off the planet. He has no connection with them. And so we had to explain things to them on their level. We also allowed them, we weren't going to overexpose them. Like, I'm not going to bring them to put my teenage daughter in a Saturday meeting and she can hear all the craziness that goes on there. But we did bring them to some functions, some talent show, and some of the functions, some of the, if you were going to the beach, whatever all the other functions were like other teens and family members were going to go. We took them and we allowed them to be around games, whatever it was. And they had fun watching. Even when Patrick wasn't around, we took them. And they grew to understand what we were learning, what we were trying to do. So it was very natural for them. And then the shots and consequences, we also used them. So it was like we had shots and consequences would be like for Patrick and Cornerstone boys, or it would be Cornerstone boys, girls, and Cornerstone girls. So same rules would apply, and we would have like different levels of shots and consequences for our younger girls, children, and for any other teens that were coming and staying with us or just being in our home. So it was very natural for us. We didn't shelter them and we didn't exclude them because that would be impossible. It's like you're singling one person out and ignoring that everything you're learning with Cornerstone might benefit someone else in your family, and it usually does, so hopefully that answered.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really well said. And for us, there's a lot of different ways you can include the siblings in Cornerstone, and it's not just putting them in. It didn't make sense for our older daughter to be put into. She didn't need OPE, or she didn't really need the Cornerstone, but we did restructure our family in a way, and the rules were different for my older daughter, but the shots really still apply. The shots are more about, they're much more fundamental than you have to be home at 10 p.m. The shots are much more, at least our shots were more along the lines of, you have to be honest. Well, that applies to a 17-year-old, that applies to a 24-year-old, that applies to anybody in the family or in the household. And so we kept our shots fundamental enough that they applied to both girls. And I would also say that our older daughter never came to the kids meetings, but she came to the adult meetings. And she did a lot of the readings, and she actually even shared in meetings a few times. That really helped her develop a little more understanding and compassion towards her sister, because up until then, their relationship was very, very strained, because everything that my younger daughter was doing was just a burden and a hassle, and it just made my older daughter's life less manageable, and so it helped her develop a little more understanding and compassion. She read the 4 Agreements, which everybody should read, and when our older daughter went off to college, she used to text us and say, "Hey, somebody lay some Cornerstone wisdom on me. I'm here. I'm facing this situation and need some tools." And so just being part of the language and part of the flow of it was very helpful for her, and the two of them have without our interference have begun to develop a relationship, which was kind of surprising to us. We didn't even know it until recently, and I think a large part of that is from our older daughter participating in some of the adult meetings and coming to a few of the functions and getting a feel for, this isn't just my little sister being a brat. There's a lot more to this. There are things that she's really struggling with, and so I would say, to the extent that it makes sense, the more you can involve your whole family, the better, and that includes aunts and uncles, cousins, everybody. The more understanding that the family has, I think the better those relationships can be.
I totally agree with that. There's just one other thing I was going to add to that, but I kind of just lost my train of thought. But it may come back to me. But one of the other things that I was thinking about is a lot of time. Oh, I remembered it. So it's situationally based, based on the child's age, maturity, level of appropriateness. Like, that's going to change depending on who we're talking about. But a lot of times in our family systems, there's been so much energy and effort and time put on whether the child that's dealing with the substance abuse or mental illness or whatever, that the other children, especially if they're younger, can kind of fall into this like lost child category. And so on whatever level, you can get the entire family engaged in the recovery process, whether that's seeing one of the clinicians, or like doing individual sessions with them, or coming to the bigger functions like the awakenings, the dances, the talent shows, things like that. On some level, some of that stuff will make sense. It'll change from family to family of what makes sense. But it's a good thing to think about, like, how can we get the whole family involved? Because everybody plays a part in where we are now, and everybody is hurting and needs to experience some healing. Your kid with the problem is like the bull in the china cabinet, but your other kids are the china. Like, they end up being beaten and bruised and battered, and they need some love and some healing too. So it's a really good question.